The door splintered under their weight. 3 men pushed harder, and the lock finally gave way. The smell hit them first. Several people turned and vomited immediately. Others covered their faces and backed away, gagging. Inside the dark house, something moved. "Obi?" someone called out, their voice shaking. "Are you in there?" A figure shuffled forward into the light from the doorway. People screamed. Some turned and ran without looking back. What stood before them was covered head to toe in silver scales. Its body was bloated and misshapen. Where hands should have been, there were only flippers. The face was stretched beyond recognition, the mouth too wide, the eyes bulging and fish-like. "Help me," it croaked in a voice that barely sounded human. This is what greed does. This is what happens when you kill something sacred for money. This is the story of how 2 men became monsters. 3 months earlier, Adamu, Wole, and Obi were fishermen in a small village by the river. Every morning before dawn, they carried their nets down to the water, while darkness still hung in the air. Mist would sit heavy over the river's surface, and the only sound was water slapping against the muddy banks as they pushed their boats into the current. These 3 men were inseparable. Brothers in every way that mattered, even though they shared no blood. They fished side by side, sold their catch at the same stalls, and when the sun finally dropped below the tree line, they would meet at Mama Cootie's Palm Wine Bar. That bar was their sanctuary. Just a small shack with wooden benches worn smooth from years of use and a thatched roof that dripped when the rains came. But it belonged to them in a way nothing else did. Every evening, they sat beneath the weak glow of kerosene lamps, drinking palm wine from calabashes and talking about their lives. Most nights, the conversations circled the same drain. Complaints dressed up as conversations. "Today was terrible," Wole would say, shaking his head slowly. "I barely made enough to feed my family." "The market is dying," Adamu would add, staring into his calabash. "People aren't buying like they used to." Obi would nod, his eyes fixed on something far away. "We work until our backs ache, but what do we have? Nothing. We're still poor." Then silence would fall over them. Each man would drift into his own thoughts about a better life that never seemed to come. They all wanted the same things: a solid house with a roof that didn't leak, enough money so their families could eat without counting every coin, maybe a wife, children. But those dreams always stayed out of reach. The worry chewed at them day and night. Some nights Obi would lie on his mat staring at the ceiling, sleep nowhere to be found, wondering if anything would ever change. Then the next evening, he would walk to Wole's house, and they would sit in the gathering darkness, talking about the same thing all over again. "What can we do, my brother?" Obi would ask. "How do we escape this?" Wole never had an answer. Among the 3 friends, Obi and Wole had become the closest. Sometimes they would talk privately, sharing things they figured Adamu didn't need to hear. Small secrets between brothers. Nothing harmful, they told themselves. There was a girl Obi liked. Her name was Adugo. She was beautiful in a way that made men forget what they were saying mid-sentence. Skin like polished wood, and eyes that caught the light when she laughed. Obi had been talking to her for months, but he had never actually told her how he felt, never asked her to be his woman or even hinted at it. They were just friends, at least on the surface. Adugo didn't know Obi had other close friends. She had never met Adamu or Wole. One evening she decided to visit his house. Darkness was creeping in when she arrived, and she was surprised to find 2 other men sitting outside with Obi. They were talking loudly, laughing about something. "Adugo!" Obi jumped to his feet. "These are my friends. This is Wole, and this is Adamu." Adugo greeted them politely, studying their faces in the lamplight. Then she went inside to prepare food for everyone. Through the doorway, she could hear their conversation continuing. "We need to travel," Adamu was saying. "Try another village. The fishing might be better somewhere else." "Or we could try the deep parts of the river," Wole suggested. The big fish stay in deep water. Adugo listened as she cooked, glancing outside now and then. That was when she really looked at Adamu. He was the most handsome of the three, tall, with a strong jawline and a smile that came easy. Something shifted in her chest. After that evening, everything changed. Adugo started showing up at the market every day, even when she had nothing to buy. She had figured out what time Adamu would be there, and she would wait by the roadside so they could walk together. They would talk and laugh, and slowly, Adugo realized she liked him. Actually liked him. She stopped visiting Obi's house, stopped cooking for him. When Obi tried to talk to her, she would give him short answers and find reasons to leave. Obi noticed. How could he not? But he tried to convince himself it meant nothing. Maybe she was just busy with her family. Then Adamu started asking about her. "How is your friend Adugo?" Adamu would say, his tone casual. "I haven't seen her at the market lately." At first, Obi brushed it off. But when Adamu kept asking, week after week, something cold settled deep in Obi's gut. Why was his friend so interested in his girl? One day, Obi was walking the path to the market when he saw something that stopped him cold. Adamu and Adugo, walking together, holding hands. Obi ducked behind a bush, his heart hammering against his ribs. He watched them pass, laughing at something only they understood. Adugo's head was tilted toward Adamu. Her face lit up with happiness. The same way she used to look at him. Adugo didn't see anything wrong with being friends with Obi's friends. To her, they were all just people. So when she and Adamu grew closer, she told him about her uncle. "My uncle is a very successful fisherman," she said one afternoon. "He's rich. He knows things about the business that most people don't." Adamu's eyes brightened. He had been struggling for so long, working himself to the bone with nothing to show for it. "Do you think he could help me?" "Let me talk to him," Adugo promised. A few days later, Adamu received an invitation to visit Adugo's uncle. The man was older, with gray threading through his beard and sharp eyes that seemed to see right through you. He welcomed Adamu warmly, pouring him palm wine. "Adugo tells me you're a hard worker," the uncle said. "That's rare these days. Most young men waste their time drinking and chasing women instead of building something." "I try my best, sir," Adamu replied. The uncle nodded, satisfied. "Because of that, I'm going to help you. I know someone who deals in special fish. Very rare, very expensive. The kind rich people in the cities will pay a fortune for. If you sell these fish, your life will change completely." Adamu could barely contain his excitement. When he got home that evening, he immediately went to find Obi and Wole to tell them everything. "This is it," Adamu said, his eyes bright with hope. "This is how we escape poverty. All three of us can do this together." But Obi wasn't listening to anything about fish or business opportunities. His face had gone hard with anger. "Why are you going behind my back with Adugo?" Obi demanded. "That's my girl." "Your girl?" Adamu looked genuinely confused. "You never asked her to be your woman. You said you were just friends." "You knew I liked her." "Obi, listen to me. Forget about the girl for a moment. This business opportunity could change our lives." "I don't want to hear it," Obi shouted. "You betrayed me." Wole tried to calm them down, but it was too late. The argument exploded into a full fight. Accusations flew back and forth. Old resentments surfaced. Things were said that could never be taken back. By the end of that night, their friendship was shattered. The next day, Adugo came to see Obi. She looked him straight in the eyes and said, "I don't like you that way. I never did. You never asked me to be your woman, so I don't know why you're angry. I like Adamu, and he likes me." Those words cut deeper than any knife. After that, Obi and Wole became inseparable, shutting Adamu out of everything. Adamu, hurt and confused, decided to focus on himself. He took the opportunity that Adugo's uncle offered him seriously. Months passed. Adamu started changing. His clothes looked newer. He built a better house. He was selling the special fish that Adugo's uncle connected him with, and business was booming. Then came the news that hurt Obi most of all. Adamu had asked for Adugo's hand in marriage, and she had said yes. They were getting married. Obi felt like his insides were being ripped apart. Every time he saw Adamu in the market, looking happy and successful, jealousy burned through him. "It's not fair," Obi told Wole one evening at the palm wine bar. "We do the same work. We fish the same river. Why is he getting rich and we're still poor?" "He must have done something," Wole said darkly. "Nobody becomes rich that quickly from selling fish." "You think he did rituals?" Wole leaned closer, dropping his voice. What else could it be? The idea took root in both their minds. Yes, that had to be it. Adamu must have used dark magic to become rich. There was no other explanation. "If he can do rituals to get rich," Obi said slowly, "then so can we." They had heard stories, of course. Everyone in the village had heard stories about mermaids, how they lived in the deepest parts of the river, how they had magic that could make a poor man rich overnight, how people would do terrible things to capture that magic. "We should try," Wole said. "What do we have to lose?" They went to see a chief priest who lived on the edge of the village. His compound smelled of incense and rotting things. Bones hung from the trees. The priest himself was ancient, with eyes that seemed to look through you instead of at you. "We want to be rich," Obi told him. The priest smiled, showing teeth filed to sharp points. "Everyone wants to be rich, but are you willing to pay the price?" "What do we need to do?" "Bring me the hair of a mermaid," the priest said. "Do that, and I will make you wealthy beyond your dreams." Obi and Wole looked at each other. Then they nodded. They chose a day when the weather was terrible. The sky was black with storm clouds, and rain hammered the earth. Thunder rolled across the sky. The wind howled through the village, and everyone stayed inside, safe and dry. Everyone except Obi and Wole. They went to the river in the middle of the storm. The water was violent, churning and angry. Waves crashed against the banks. Any sane person would have turned back. But Obi and Wole were beyond sanity now. They were desperate. They climbed into a boat and pushed off into the raging river. The boat rocked hard with each wave. Water splashed over the sides, soaking through their clothes. The storm tried to push them back, but they kept rowing, heading toward the deepest part of the river. Lightning split the sky, and for a brief moment, everything was bright as day. Then darkness swallowed them again. They had been rowing for what felt like hours when Wole grabbed Obi's arm. "Wait," Wole whispered. "Do you hear that?" Obi stopped rowing. Over the sound of the storm, there was something else. Singing, faint and haunting, coming from somewhere in the water ahead. The hair on the back of Obi's neck stood up. "There!" Wole suddenly shouted, pointing with a shaking hand. About 50 feet away, something broke the surface of the water. At first, it looked like a large fish, but then it rose higher, and they saw the unmistakable shape of a head. Long black hair spread across the water's surface. The singing stopped. "Cast the net," Obi hissed. "Now!" Their hands fumbled with the net, nearly dropping it twice before they managed to throw it. The net sailed through the rain and disappeared into the dark water. For a moment, nothing happened. The surface of the river was empty. Then the net went tight. Something was caught. The boat lurched forward, nearly capsizing. Whatever was in the net was strong, very strong. "Pull!" Wole shouted. They grabbed the net and pulled with everything they had. Their arms burned. Their hands bled where the rope cut into their palms. But they kept pulling. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, they dragged their catch toward the boat. The water around them began to glow, a faint greenish light that seemed to come from deep below. "What is that?" Obi's voice cracked. "Just keep pulling." The thing in the net was fighting now. They could feel it thrashing, trying to break free. The boat rocked violently from side to side. Water poured in faster. Then, suddenly, the struggling stopped. They pulled the net up the side of the boat and finally got their first clear look at what they had caught. Both men froze, It was a mermaid. Her upper body was that of a woman, but more beautiful than any woman either of them had ever seen. Her skin was pale, almost luminescent in the darkness. Long black hair clung to her shoulders and arms. But from the waist down, she was pure fish. Silver scales covered her tail, each one catching what little light there was and throwing it back like tiny mirrors. Her eyes were the worst part. They weren't quite human. Too large, too dark, and when she blinked, a second transparent eyelid slid across from the side. Those eyes locked onto theirs, and Obi felt his stomach turn to ice. There was intelligence there, ancient intelligence. She knew exactly what they wanted. She knew exactly what they were about to do. "Please," she said. Her voice was nothing like a human voice. It sounded like water moving over smooth stones, like wind through reeds, like something that should not be able to speak at all. "Please don't do this." The net had tangled around her arms and tail, binding her tight. She wasn't struggling anymore, just looking at them with those impossible eyes. Obi pulled out his knife. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped it. But his greed was stronger than his fear, stronger than the voice in his head screaming at him to let her go. "We need your hair," he said, his voice barely audible over the storm. The mermaid's expression changed. The pleading look vanished, replaced by something cold and knowing. "If you do this," she said, her voice now carrying an edge that made the storm seem quiet, "you will regret it for the rest of your miserable lives." Wole reached forward and grabbed a handful of her hair. It was cold and slippery, like seaweed, but impossibly strong. "The river does not forget," the mermaid continued, her voice rising. "I do not forget." Obi brought the knife closer. His whole body was shaking now. Wole tightened his grip on her hair, yanking her head back to expose her neck. The mermaid's eyes went wide, not with fear, with rage. "You will suffer," she hissed. "You will suffer as I have suffered. The curse of the water is upon you. You will become what you have killed." Obi pressed the blade against her throat. The mermaid opened her mouth and screamed. It was a sound that didn't belong in the world of men. It came from somewhere deep, somewhere old, somewhere that should have stayed buried. The scream pierced through the storm, louder than the thunder, sharper than the lightning. It felt like the sound was drilling into their skulls. Obi gritted his teeth and began to cut. The blade was sharp, but her flesh was tough. He had to saw back and forth, back and forth. Blood poured out, thick and dark, almost black in the dim light. It was warm where it splashed across his hands. The smell hit him immediately, salt and copper and something else, something rotten. The mermaid thrashed in the net. Her tail slammed against the side of the boat, nearly cracking the wood. Her body convulsed. But Wole held her hair tight, his knuckles white, his face twisted with effort and horror. "Keep going," Wole shouted over her screams. "Finish it!" Obi kept sawing. The blade hit something hard, bone. He pushed harder, grinding through it. The mermaid's screams turned to wet gurgles. More blood poured out, running down into the boat, mixing with the rainwater at their feet. Her eyes stayed locked on Obi's face the entire time. Even as the light began to fade from them, they never looked away. Those eyes promised things, terrible things. Finally, with one last hack of the blade, her head came free. The body went limp. It slid backward out of the net and disappeared beneath the black water without a sound. The tail gave one final twitch as it sank, and then it was gone. But the head remained in Wole's hands. The eyes were still open, still staring. The mouth hung slack, blood dripping from the lips. But somehow, impossibly, the lips moved. "You will become what you have killed," the head whispered, even though it was no longer attached to lungs or throat. "The river remembers. I remember." Then the eyes finally went blank. Obi and Wole sat in the boat, holding the severed head between them. The rain was still falling. The storm was still raging. But everything felt quiet now. Cold. Wrong. Neither man spoke as they rowed back to shore. They brought the head to the chief priest. When they knocked on his door, he opened it immediately, as if he had been waiting for them. He looked at the head in their hands and smiled. "You have done well," he said, taking the dripping head from them. His hands were steady. He showed no disgust, no fear. "Now we can begin." He turned and walked deeper into his compound. Obi and Wole followed, their feet heavy. The priest set the head on a wooden table and lit candles around it. Then he looked at them seriously. "This magic comes with consequences. Great consequences. Even though you will become rich, there will be a price to pay. Are you ready to accept that?" Obi and Wole looked at each other. They thought about their poverty, about Adamu's success, about everything they had endured, about the years of struggling while watching everyone else get ahead. "Yes," they said together, "we accept." "Very well." The priest began his incantations. The words were in no language either man recognized. They sounded ancient, guttural, like something that hurt to hear. He took a knife and began cutting the hair from the mermaid's head. As he worked, the candles flickered. The air in the room grew thick and heavy, harder to breathe. Shadows appeared on the walls, moving and dancing even though there was no wind to move them. The priest divided the hair between two calabashes, placing each strand carefully. When he finished, he sealed both calabashes with wax and spoke one final word over them. The candles all blew out at once. In the sudden darkness, Obi could have sworn he heard that voice again. The mermaid's voice, whispering something he couldn't quite make out. When the priest relit the candles, he handed each man a calabash. "Take these home," he instructed. "Keep them under your beds. Every night for the next 3 nights, at midnight exactly, you must wake and chant these words." He taught them a phrase in that same terrible language, made them repeat it until they had it memorized. "On the morning of the 4th day, you will see the result." They did exactly as he instructed. Every night at midnight, they woke up and chanted the strange words over the calabashes. The words felt wrong in their mouths, like speaking them was damaging something inside. Nothing seemed to happen, but the calabashes felt warm when they held them, unnaturally warm. On the first night, Obi had dreams about the mermaid. She was swimming toward him through dark water, her eyes glowing, her mouth open in a silent scream. On the second night, Wole woke up with the taste of salt water in his mouth. On the third night, both men heard singing outside their windows, that same haunting melody from the storm. But when they looked outside, nothing was there. Then came the morning of the 4th day. Obi woke up to find his small house full of fish. Not ordinary fish. These were beautiful, exotic fish that he had never seen before. They filled every corner of his house, flopping on the floor, piled against the walls. Bright colors, strange shapes, the kind of fish that rich people in the cities would pay a fortune for. He ran to Wole's house and found the same thing had happened to him. They began selling the fish immediately. People came from all over to buy from them. The fish never seemed to run out. Every morning, there would be more. Fresh, valuable, impossible. Within weeks, Obi and Wole were rich. They built new houses, bigger and better than anyone else's in the village. They bought new clothes, fine fabrics from the city. People who had ignored them before now greeted them with respect. Women who had never looked at them twice suddenly found reasons to walk past their houses. Word spread through the village about the 2 fishermen who had suddenly become wealthy. Even Adamu heard the news. Despite everything that had happened between them, he felt genuinely happy for his old friends. Maybe, he thought, they had finally found their own success. But the happiness would not last. One morning, 3 weeks after the ritual, Obi woke up screaming. He stumbled out of bed, his heart pounding. Something felt wrong. His arms felt strange, tight, like the skin didn't fit anymore. He caught sight of himself in the small mirror on his wall. What he saw made his blood turn to ice. His arms were covered in scales, fish scales, Silver and iridescent, they covered his skin from his wrists to his elbows. They glinted in the morning light, catching the sun and throwing it back in rainbow colors, beautiful and horrifying. He touched them with shaking fingers. They were real. They were part of his skin. When he tried to scratch one off, pain shot through his arm like he was tearing his own flesh. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." He threw on a long-sleeved shirt to cover his arms and ran to Wole's house. He didn't even knock, just burst through the door. Wole was standing in the middle of his room, staring at his own hands. They too were covered in scales. His fingers looked webbed, the skin between them stretched and translucent. "It's the mermaid," Wole said quietly, his voice hollow. "The curse. It's happening." They remembered her voice in the storm, her final words as the blade cut through her neck. "You will become what you have killed." Terror gripped them both. They rushed to the chief priest's compound, running through the village in broad daylight. People stared as they passed, but neither man cared anymore. When they arrived, the priest took one look at them and shook his head. "I warned you," the priest said coldly. "I told you there would be consequences. You said you accepted them. Now you must live with your choice." "Please," Obi begged, falling to his knees. "Help us. Reverse this." "There is no reversal. The river's curse cannot be broken. What the river takes, the river keeps. Now get out of my sight before your misfortune infects my home." He shut the door in their faces. They could hear him sliding the bolt into place. Back at Obi's house, the two men turned on each other. "This is your fault," Obi shouted, ripping off his long-sleeved shirt to reveal his scaled arms. "You're the one who suggested we go to that priest." "My fault?" Wole's eyes blazed with anger. "You're the one who got jealous over a girl who never even liked you." "If you had just listened to Adamu when he wanted us to join his business, we would be rich the honest way. But no, you had to turn everything into a problem because of your stupid jealousy." "Don't blame me for your own greed." "You're the greedy one. You couldn't stand to see Adamu happy, so you dragged us both into this nightmare." They fought viciously, screaming at each other, saying things they could never take back. Obi shoved Wole. Wole shoved back harder. They circled each other like animals, both of them breathing hard, both of them terrified and furious. When it was over, they couldn't even look at each other. Wole left and never came back. Now all three friends were separated. Adamu had moved on with his life long ago, building something real with hard work and honesty. And now Obi and Wole couldn't bear to be near each other. Each man was a reminder of the terrible mistake they had made together. Each man was a mirror showing the other what he had become. The scales continued to spread. Every day, more of their bodies were covered. The scales crept up their arms, across their chests, down their legs. They were thick and rough, layered over each other. And underneath them, their skin began to rot. The smell was unbearable. A sickly, sweet stench of decay that attracted flies by the hundreds. Both men stopped leaving their houses. They couldn't let anyone see what they had become. They locked their doors and sat in the darkness, watching their bodies transform into something inhuman. The scales didn't just cover them, they changed them. Their fingers began to fuse together, the bones dissolving and reforming. Their feet flattened and spread, toes merging into flat paddles. Their eyes grew larger, rounder, pushing forward in their skulls until they bulged out. They were becoming fish, slowly, agonizingly. They were becoming fish. The agony was constant. Their skin felt like it was burning and freezing at the same time. They couldn't eat. The smell of cooked food made them gag. The only thing that didn't make them sick was raw fish, and even that they could barely keep down. They couldn't sleep for more than an hour at a time before the pain woke them. They could barely think through the constant torment. Weeks passed like this. Their customers at the market began to worry. Where were Obi and Wole? Why had they not been seen in so long? Their stalls sat empty. Their new houses? The ones they had built with their cursed wealth were always dark. No smoke from cooking fires. No lamps at night. Nothing. A group of concerned villagers decided to check on them. They went to Obi's house first. As they approached, they noticed the flies. Hundreds of them, thousands maybe, swarming around the house in a dark, buzzing cloud. The sound alone was disturbing, like static in the air. Then the smell hit them, so strong that several people covered their noses and turned away immediately. One woman gagged and had to step back. "Something is very wrong," one man said, his voice muffled through the cloth he pressed against his face. They knocked on the door. No answer. They knocked again, louder, pounding with their fists. Still nothing, but they could hear movement inside. Slow, dragging sounds. Something scraping against the floor. "Obi," they called. "Are you in there? Are you all right?" Silence. Then more of that dragging sound, getting closer to the door. Finally, Mama Ngozi, one of the village elders, made the decision. Break it down. 3 strong men put their shoulders to the door and pushed. The wood groaned. They pushed again. The lock broke with a crack, and the door swung inward. The smell that rushed out was so overpowering that several people vomited immediately. Others turned and ran, unable to handle it. Even the men who had broken down the door staggered backward, coughing and choking. Inside, in the darkness, something moved. "Obi?" Someone called hesitantly, their voice shaking. A figure shuffled forward into the light from the doorway. People screamed. Some turned and ran without looking back. Even the bravest men stepped back in pure horror. What stood before them barely looked human anymore. Obi was covered head to toe in scales. His body was bloated and misshapen, swollen in some places, sunken in others. Where his hands should have been, there were flipper-like appendages, the fingers completely fused together into flat paddles. His face was stretched and distorted, the features all wrong. His mouth was too wide, extending almost to where his ears used to be. His eyes bulged out of his skull, round and glassy and fish-like, with no eyelids left to close them. And the smell. The smell of rotting flesh and seawater and something else. Something unnatural and wrong that shouldn't exist in the world of the living. "Help me," Obi croaked, his voice barely recognizable. It sounded wet, gargled, like he was speaking underwater. Mama Ngozi, despite being a brave woman who had seen much in her long life, had to steel herself before stepping forward. The stench was almost a physical barrier. "What happened to you?" she demanded, her voice hard to hide her own revulsion. "What is this?" And Obi told them everything. He told them about the jealousy that had consumed him when he saw Adamu with a dugo, about going to the chief priest with Wole, about rowing out into the storm to the deepest part of the river, about finding the mermaid and trapping her in their net, about cutting off her head while she screamed and cursed them, about the wealth that came after and the curse that followed. His voice was wet and broken, stopping frequently to cough up something dark, but he told them everything. There was no point in hiding it anymore. By the time he finished, many of the villagers were weeping, not for Obi, but from the sheer horror of what he had done, from the knowledge that such evil had been committed in their village, in their river. Mama Ngozi's face was hard as stone. "You killed one of the river's children," she said, her voice cold. "You murdered a sacred being for money. Now you wear your crime on your skin for all to see." She turned to the others. "Mark these houses, both of them. No one is to help them. No food, no water, no comfort. They brought this on themselves. Let them live with what they have done until the river claims them." The villagers left quickly, glad to escape the smell and the sight. Soon both Obi's and Wole's homes were marked with red paint, large X's on the doors and walls, a warning to stay away. The houses of the cursed. Obi and Wole lived in their separate homes for weeks more, each man alone with his guilt and his pain. The scales continued to spread until there was no human skin left. Their bodies continued to decay underneath the scales, the flesh liquefying slowly. They could barely move, could barely breathe. Their lungs were changing, trying to become gills, but the transformation was incomplete and agonizing. In his final days, Obi thought constantly about the choices he had made. If only he had let go of his jealousy over Adugo. If only he had been happy for his friend when Adamu found success. If only he had listened when Adamu offered to help them all succeed together. If only he had been content with his simple life, instead of wanting more, always more, never satisfied. But regret changes nothing. The past cannot be undone. One morning, the neighbors noticed that the flies around Obi's house had multiplied even more. The buzzing was so loud you could hear it from the road. The smell had changed too. It was no longer the smell of rotting flesh. It was the smell of death, final and absolute. When they finally entered his house 3 days later, holding cloths soaked in herbs over their faces, they found him dead on the floor. His body was completely transformed. He looked more like a beached fish than a man. The scales covered every inch of him. His face was unrecognizable. His limbs had twisted into fins. If you didn't know what you were looking at, you would never guess it had once been human. Wole was found the same way in his own house, dead on the floor, transformed completely, alone in the darkness. The villagers burned both houses to the ground, trying to cleanse the land of the curse. The flames rose high into the sky, and the smoke was black and thick and smelled terrible. They burned everything. The houses, the bodies, even the ground beneath. Then they salted the earth, so nothing would grow there again. But the story lived on. Parents told it to their children as a warning. Never let greed consume you. Never take what doesn't belong to you. Never harm the sacred beings of the river. The story was passed down through generations, whispered around fires at night, used to keep children from wandering too close to the deep water. Because the river remembers, and the river always takes what it is owed. Adamu lived a long and happy life with Adugo. They had children who grew strong and healthy. His business prospered through honest work and fair dealings. Sometimes, late at night when he couldn't sleep, he would think about his old friends and feel a deep sadness about how things had ended. But he never regretted choosing honesty and hard work over shortcuts and dark magic. The years passed, and the village slowly forgot about the two cursed fishermen. New families moved in. Children were born who never knew Obi and Wole. Life continued. But the fishermen who work the deep waters remember. They say that on certain nights, when the moon is hidden and the air is thick with mist, you can hear singing coming from the river. Not one voice, but three. A woman's voice, high and haunting, joined by two others that sound like men trying to scream through water. Old fishermen warn the young ones never to go out on those nights. They say the river is hungry then, looking for someone to join the voices below. There are stories of men who didn't listen, men who heard the singing and rode out to investigate. Some came back shaking, refusing to speak about what they saw in the deep water. Others never came back at all. The spot where Obi and Wole's houses once stood remains bare. Nothing grows there. Even during the rainy season when everything else turns green, that ground stays dead and gray. Children won't play near it. Dogs won't cross it. Jealousy will poison everything it touches. Obi couldn't be happy for his friend's success, and that bitterness destroyed him. Greed makes you believe shortcuts are worth any price, but they always demand something terrible in return. The things worth having are built slowly, honestly, with your own hands. If you enjoyed this story, hit that subscribe button and join us for more tales that will keep you up at night. And to all my returning subscribers, thank you for being here. Your support means everything. Until next time, stay safe and remember, some prices are too high to pay.